Hey guys, I'm here with the Friday vocab. We have 5 words we're going to go through today, and it's going to kind of be a continuation of what we learned on Thursday. On Thursday, we talked about what are called alleles, and remember I said the alleles are each one of these letters. So alleles, they are a form of a gene, and they are, you have to have 2 copies to create one gene. Okay, so we need 2 alleles to make one gene. So if we look here, these 2 alleles, these 2 lowercase p's, they represent horns in a cow. So two alleles, 1 gene. So 2 alleles, the 2 little p's here, for the gene of horns. And then over here, for the 2 capital P's, 2 copies, 2 little p's, create 1 gene, no horns. All right, so 2 copies to create 1 gene. You get 1 allele from each parent. So when you are first made, you get half your information, half your DNA from your mom, half from your dad. For this specific example, for these cows, the horns, they are what we're going to call recessive. So if you were to select a letter from here to be passed on, the only one that you could pick would be a little p because it doesn't have any big ones. Okay, so this cow is going to pass on 1 p, which we see here. And then our other cow has 2 capital, or what we call 2 dominant alleles. So 2 big p's. Dominant alleles are shown by 2 capital letters, recessive, 2 lowercase letters, which we'll talk about in a second. But so if this cow is going to pass on an allele to their children or their offspring, it would only be able to give a big P. So then when we have an allele for horns, okay, we have a big P and a little p. And in this case, no horns is dominant to horns, okay? So we end up with a no-horned cow. But anyways, just kind of repeat what the alleles are. So there are these letter combinations, and when we have parents to offspring, we have to look at what they can give. Okay, so this cow can only give a small p to the baby cow, and this cow can only give a big P to the baby cow. So its allele combination ends up being big P, little p. Okay, so like I said, you get 2 copies to create 1 gene. In this case, we're talking about horns versus no horns. And then you get 1 allele from each parent. The next word we're going to talk about is heterozygous. Okay, I know that's kind of a mouthful. Heterozygous, the prefix hetero means different or not the same. Okay, so I'm going to put hetero. It's different or not the same. All right, and in this case, we're talking about allele combinations. So 2 different alleles. 1 big, 1 little. So if we're looking at these 3 allele combinations, a heterozygous one is going to be this one. It has a big P and a little p. So that tells me it's heterozygous, it's different. Okay, 2 different letters. The next word we're going to talk about is homozygous. Okay, the prefix homo means same. Okay, so 2 of the same alleles. So either 2 big or 2 small. All right, in this case, we're looking at these 2 sets of alleles. So this allele combination is homozygous because it is the same. I have 2 lowercase p's. Same thing with this one. Okay, it's homozygous because you have 2 of the same, 2 big, 2 uppercase p's. So that's heterozygous, different down here, 1 of each, 1 big, 1 small. Homozygous can either be 2 big, 2 little, or 2 big. The next word we're going to talk about is dominant. So a dominant allele is going to be a trait that is expressed and you only need 1 dominant allele in order for it to show up. Okay, so a dominant allele is going to be a capital letter. It's going to be represented by a capital letter. So in this case, we have two dominant alleles, two homozygous dominant alleles right here for this one because we have two capital letters. So if it's dominant, it's going to have a capital letter in it. Now if we look at this one, we see it does have a capital letter, so it is going to show up because it is dominant. So you can see this one has no horns because this is the dominant trait. So dominant is represented by one dominant allele, one capital letter, and it only has to have one. If it has two, it's still dominant, but it only has to have one to show up or to be observed. The next one we're going to talk about is a recessive allele. And this is a trait that can only be expressed if both are inherited from parents. So you need both small letters in order to see a recessive trait. Okay? So in this case, if we're looking at this one, since this cow only gives one allele and this cow gives one allele, we're never going to be able to have two small alleles or recessive because this one can only give big P's, this one can only give little p's. So recessive has to be two little p's. So for example, Mrs. Sunken is left-handed. That's shocking, I know. Mrs. Sunken is left-handed, which is a recessive trait, and it actually is. So right-handed is a dominant trait. So if we were to look at my parents, both my parents are right-handed people, and so is my sister. So let's go Mrs. Sunken. So let's go Dad and Mom. All right, and then Mrs. Sunken. So my allele combination, so we're going to go with R because we're going with the letter R because R is dominant. So when you're doing these allele combinations, whatever's dominant, use that letter. It's going to be way easier. So right-handed is a dominant trait. So my allele combination is going to be little r, okay? You're probably saying, well, little r should be little l because left-handed. Well, no, since right-handed is dominant, we're going to use R for the whole thing. Okay, so Mrs. Sunken is left-handed. I have a recessive trait, so I have two little r's. So remember our horns up here, the recessive was two little p's. Okay, same thing down here, two little r's. Now, if both my parents are right-handed, you're probably thinking, how can she be left-handed? Well, both of my parents have a recessive trait. Okay, like this guy right here. So instead of them having two capital letters, so two capital R's, they have a big R and a little r. So they can pass that down to me. Okay? So from my allele combination from my mom and my dad, I each got a little r from them. Okay, that made my allele combination a little r, little r. So that is why I am left-handed. So I have a recessive trait. Okay, so this is homozygous because they're the same, recessive, and these ones are heterozygous because they have different allele combinations. They have a big R and a little r. All right, so those are your vocab for Friday.